So, words at the top of the inside flap of Nile Rodgers' behind-the-scenes memoir, Le Freak, an upside-down story of family, disco, and destiny, says it all. You will hear a Nile Rodgers song today. It will make you happy. Casual music fans may not recognize Rodgers' name, but they will recognize his music. In the 70s and 80s, he wrote and produced the songs that defined that era, among them Le Freak, Good Times, We Are Family. You say, can't read that family. You have to say, we are family. Right. And Like a Virgin, Modern Love, and many more. And aside from his own band, Chic, he worked with everyone, from Diana Ross and Madonna to David Bowie and Duran Duran, not to mention Mick Jagger, Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, Michael Jackson, Prince, Rod Stewart, Robert Plant, Paul Simon, Peter Gabriel, Grace Jones, and many others, transforming their music, selling millions of records, and redefining what a pop song could be. One reviewer writes that the best music is the stuff we feel, the stuff that speaks to us and won't let go, and Rodgers' memoir does all that and much more. I'm going to quote somebody who is named by Darren Star, and he's creator of Sex and the City. And the reason I'm quoting him is he said, Nile Rodgers taught me the meaning of chic at a very young age. His rollicking life story from an outrageous childhood straight out of Pulp Fiction through his rise to create some of the biggest hits in the time is an addictive read. It's the story behind the music is nothing compared to the story behind Nile Rodgers. This memoir is the inside story of pop and its tangled roots, narrated by a man who absorbed everything in his topsy-turvy life. The pain and euphoria and the fear and love turned it into some of the most sparkling, ebullient music, pop music ever recorded. Sadly, we are out of books tonight because our supplier gave us all that they had, but we do have book plates that I'm sure he will be happy to sign that you can put into a book that you get elsewhere. An anonymous note, quote, that's at the beginning of the prologue for the book sets our stage for tonight. Life isn't about surviving the storm, it's about learning how to dance in the rain. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I introduce Nile Rodgers.
How are you? I sort of know like almost half the people in the room, which is cool, actually. Yeah. Anyway, before I even say a word, or another word, how many people have read the book already? I don't want to be redundant. Okay, so not everybody. All right. Cool, now I get to pontificate. Anyway, I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about tonight. I wasn't sure if I was going to read from the book, which I always hate, unless it's like some English person. And also, a lot of people told me that they were going to bring their children, so I was thinking, But I see that he's pretty cool guy, and he's got a guitar, so he's all right. And the other children are old. They're like 6'4" and stuff like that. So I guess I could probably talk about everything, right? You're all right? Okay, good. So basically, this book really is the story of my life. Let me finish my hard candy here. When I started writing this book, let me tell you the etiology of this thing. I never ever set out to write this book. That was not my intention at all. As a matter of fact, what happened is I was tricked into writing it. A good friend of mine, whom I hadn't seen for many years, about 13 or 14 years, saw me at this party. What had happened is I bought my house here in Westport, Connecticut about, wow, right, 30 years, is that possible? Yeah, like a long, long time ago. And what happened, as you will read in the book, I suffered from a really bad drinking and drug problem, and I came up here to Silver Hill Hospital in New Canaan to recover, I guess. And when I came up here, which is some 17 years ago, my doctor thought that I'd have a tough time staying off the booze and the drugs, so he asked me to stay close to the hospital, which I did. And that was 17 years ago, and I haven't picked up a drink or drug since. I also haven't moved back to New York. But anyway, so what happened is that this guy hadn't seen me for a long time, and the last time he saw me, I used to be the life of the party. So I walk into the room, and it's a rock stars party, and blah, 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 and they're, oh my God, Nile, you should write a book and tell your story, because in the old days, I'd walk into a room, and I was the guy with the drugs and pretty drunk, and the parties were, the stories were interesting. The great thing about those days is that half the people I was talking about were all in the room. So I knew that the stuff wouldn't really offend anyone because they had all heard it before. As a matter of fact, when I was writing the book, people would walk up to me and say, hey, did you tell them the story about that? Did you tell them the story about this? And I was like, I tried, but the book was like 900 pages and they cut it down. So anyway, what had happened is that when this guy saw me, he took me to lunch. And he says, I really think you should write your story because it's interesting. I've heard you tell it many times. And he wasn't really interested in the music part because he knew that. He was interested in my childhood. And he asked me if I wanted a ghostwriter. And I said, absolutely. Everybody in the rock and roll business has a ghostwriter. You think I want to spend all my time doing this? And I said, and besides, I've never written anything over a few pages in my life. The longest thing I'd ever written, was a Dear Jane letter breaking up with a girlfriend, and with like 6 or 7 pages. But that really was it. And he said, well, before we do that, before we hire a ghostwriter, I just want to try a little exercise. And he gives me 20 questions, and he asked me to answer those questions, proofread them once, edit them, and don't read them that second time after I edited it. So I did that. So she's shaking her head. I guess she must be a writer. So I didn't know what the hell was going on. So I did this, and I finished the 20 questions. I sent it to him. All he did was bind them and send them back to me. And then he asked me to read them aloud. I read them aloud, and he says, now tell me if you think that guy can write. I says, wow, that sounds pretty good. He says, great, well, that's chapter 1. And that's exactly how it started. He says, that's 3,000 words you have there. And next thing you know, I was off and running. 4 years later, I finished the thing. So anyway, he was really interested in my childhood, as I said, because he knew all the rock and roll stuff. This guy was the editor of New Yorker magazine, so he knew everybody and he'd heard it all a million times. But he was particularly taken with my childhood story, which every time he would see me and I got drunker and drunker, I'd reveal more and more. And in those first 20 questions that he asked me, it was sort of setting it up. It was setting the book up. And I didn't realize what he was doing at the time. And as I said, I just started, the bit that he told me was chapter 1 wasn't in fact chapter 1. What he was doing is he was tricking me into writing chapter 1 plus a proposal. And after I finished those 20 questions, it was the essence of chapter 1, but it also took you through to the end of the book, which was really interesting to me. So when I walked into Random House with this thing, this document, to my surprise, unlike the record business, everybody in the room, and it was like a lot of people, maybe 15 people at this meeting, they all knew what was going on. They had all read it, and it was a lot to read. So anyway, needless to say, this is all just to tell you that this has been an incredible journey, one that I never expected would turn out like it's turned out. But I'm thrilled that I did it. I'm thrilled that I spent these 4 years toiling away, because it's brought me closer to my family in a way that I never thought possible. I was born in New York City in 1952. Ow, I hate to say that. I'm going to be 60 this year. Ouch. 60 in rock and roll business. Like Mick Jagger or something. But anyway, and my mom, literally, she got pregnant right after her first. She had one period and got pregnant, right away. She was 13 years old, and in those days, it wasn't cool for a teenager. Maybe it's not even cool now, but I've seen a lot more teens with kids. But in the old days, they tried to pretend like the kids didn't have the kids, you know, so they'd send them off to a reform school, which is what they did to my mom, and they convinced her to put me up for adoption. And what they would do is everybody in the community would play along with this charade, and they would say that she went to boarding school. We lived in the ghetto, right? And we said, Beverly's gone off to boarding school now, and she wants more. Anyway, so she came home without me after I was born, and I guess her maternal instinct got the better of her, and she convinced her mom that she wanted to go back and retrieve me. And in those days, parents had pretty strong and powerful custodial rights. So even though she was, at this time now, a 14-year-old girl wanting to raise this child, the law and the prevailing winds were sort of on her side, so she was able to get me back. And her dad was a really tough guy. And when she did that, she says that he's the person that she was the most frightened of in the world. So for her to go up against him and get the kid, because he absolutely wanted me out of the house and out of their lives, when she did that, it was an act of total defiance, and he kicked her out. So now she's a 14-year-old with no place to live, and so instead of going back to junior high school, she gets a job and does the best she can. I grew up my whole life thinking my mom didn't want me, because from my earliest memories, I just remember being dropped off from one place to the other, one relative to the next, all over the place. Also, I was born with asthma, incredibly sickly, so I spent most of my early childhood in hospitals, in oxygen tents, and so you couple that with what I could remember of being dropped off from one place, as my grandmother would say, you know, I'm living from pillar to post. By the time I was about 6 years old, I felt very unwanted and very unloved. And I developed a great coping mechanism to deal with my loneliness, because not only was I lonely and unloved, I felt every horrible thing you could think of. So I started to retreat within myself, and I started to sing songs to myself, and I started to compose, and I started to look around at things and just sing tunes, because somehow music made me feel good. It really did. It worked. I remember I used to read a lot when I was a kid, and I read The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. And I was into it. I was totally into it. And I started fantasizing, and I used to pretend I was Errol Flynn and all that sort of thing. But the thing that I loved the most were musicals and composing and doing songs and imagining that I was in those big Busby Berkeley things, even just walking down the street. And I have to say that really saved me. The way that I frame that in the book, I think it's pretty clear how it all sort of evolves. You know, I felt very uncomfortable in school. You know, so not only did my authority figures move me around from school to school, but when I was in the school for any length of time, I felt uncomfortable. I actually wanted to move. So it's funny how you start to imitate the behavior that's going on around you because you don't know anything else. So I never felt at rest. I never felt at ease. So in those early years in New York, I was very, very, very uncomfortable. And then my mom got pregnant with her second kid. Ouch. And she suffered from postpartum depression before they knew what that was. And so every day my mom would go through this wacky ritual where she would take a butcher knife and stick it in the table and tell me that she was going to murder my little brother when she got back. She would like prepare a sack lunch, put it in a paper bag, and it was pretty amazing. She never went through with it. But at the time, she would see a psychiatrist every day, and he convinced her that she was a danger to herself and others, namely me and my little brother. And at that point, I moved to Los Angeles with her mother. See, the reason why you got a book is because this stuff is complicated. And I think I tell it very well in the book. It sort of sings all the way through it, and you get through it, and you go, okay, you can't stop reading it. So it's actually, you know, I want to try and just sort of skim through it a little bit, just so you can maybe titillate the people who didn't get a chance to buy one and go, wow, he tells that story so much better on the pages than he does standing up in front of a room full of strangers. But anyway, so from that point on in California, I was going to Catholic school. There you go. Now the yarn gets really complicated. So I'm unloved, hate myself, blah, blah, blah. School, go to Los Angeles. I'm in Catholic school. My grandmother was a devout Catholic. She's the one who put me in Catholic school. My mom was a devout atheist. She thought that religion was ridiculous, and Catholicism was even more ridiculous. And of course, I wanted to make my mother happy, and so I sort of sided in, you know, with my mother's beliefs. And that created a lot of friction between myself and my grandmother, who was now my main caretaker. And so I started to play hooky, which was, don't listen to this. It was amazing. It was fantastic. I'm living in Los Angeles, and there's a part of Los Angeles that they call Skid Row. And at that time, and I'm sure it probably hasn't changed a great, well, who knows. But this is where all the grindhouse movie theaters were. And in the old days, they didn't have ratings, you know, for movies. I don't even remember when the rating system came, but at that point I was already big. But when I was a kid, there was no rating. So whatever the movie was, if you wanted to see it, if you were dumb enough to give them the money and watch a movie you didn't understand, even if it were in a foreign language with subtitles, they let you in. And I know because I saw many of those foreign language films with subtitles when I was 6, 7 years old. And you know, I played hooky for 75 days straight. I set the national truancy record for Catholic school, and you can see in the book I'm very proud of that. It was, I devised this plan that was as complicated as the D-Day invasion, and I executed with military precision. It was incredible. So all this while I was going to these movies every day, these movie theaters, these grindhouse theaters where you can go in and see 3, 4, 5 films. I was taking in this knowledge. I was just sucking in information at an incredible rate. Watching movies and television was a hell of a lot more entertaining, didactic than going to school. The stuff they were teaching me at school was see, dick, run. See, you know, we had standardized education, so it was all the same. See, spot, go. Hey, man, run, baby, run, baby, run. Burn, baby, burn. You know. But at the movie theater was Marcello Mastroianni, and it was all sorts of stuff. It was everything. I was like, and it was Fred Astaire, and there were musicals, Busby Berkeley. They'd have film orgies, as they would call it. I learned the word orgy at 6 or 7 years old. Just tons of films and music. Music was incredible to me, listening to the scores of films. The other thing that was fantastic, that was a great savior, was in those days, every school in America, as you probably know, some people are my age, they taught art, music, all this stuff was just part of the normal curriculum. It didn't mean anything that the kids sounded terrible, but it was just something that you were taught. Everybody was taught music. That didn't mean that you took to it, that didn't mean that you learned how to play an instrument well, but they stuck one in your hands, they stuck one in your mouth, they, you know, taught you how to play, they taught you how it all worked. That was the one thing in school I gravitated towards and loved. I love studying music. I love playing with all the various orchestras. It put, you know, when you're jamming with people, even when you're a little kid, you don't think of it as jamming, but there's that sort of camaraderie as the whole unit gets it right, sort of. For me, it was an incredible feeling. And like now, the other day, talk about segue. The other day I went to watch one of my friend's kids play at School of Rock or whatever, and I could just watch them. They were all out of tune and stuff, but they were having the times of their lives. That's how I was when I was a kid. We were all out of tune, but I just absolutely loved it, and I sucked it in like a vacuum cleaner. By the time I was 8 or 7, 8 or 9, I actually was pretty good at the instruments that they assigned me in the school orchestra. Started playing classical music, playing woodwinds, and I had asthma. They'd always assign you whatever was light in the orchestra. So if they didn't have this, they just give you that thing just so you could have a cohesive unit. The good thing about that was that I learned how every instrument in the symphony orchestra basically functioned by the time I was pretty young. And that knowledge would serve me very well later on in life when I became a professional and started to arrange and orchestrate and work for different people with different disciplines. It was all of that childhood stuff, learning how to get along with other kids. I remember, boy, like I said, man, I'm king of the segue. When I remember seeing my first report card that said, Nile doesn't pay attention in class, and he doesn't get along well with others, which was amazing to me because while I was sitting in class, I was fantasizing, and I would go home and tell my mother about these great adventures I had. But meanwhile, from the teacher's perspective, I was probably isolating, just sitting all by myself. But as far as I was concerned, I was thoroughly entertained. And life, as tough as it was, because I'm making light of it because I want you to read the book, because I see that most of you haven't. I'm making light of it, but my life was very, very difficult. It was really sad. But when I found this great coping mechanism in music, it was a terrific crutch. And it was something that I look forward to every day. I look forward to doing my music lessons. So let me just skip over the young childhood and get to the part that gets really cool. So I was about 13 years old. President Kennedy had already been shot, and America was changing quickly, and I got the greatest job in my life. I was working, so I moved back to New York for a while, blah, 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 that was all cool. Then I moved back to Los Angeles with my grandmother again. And at that point, I got a job at the Van Nuys Skyways, the Van Nuys Airport. And that was probably, and still is, the hippest general aviation airport in the world. It's like all the stars have their own private planes there, and that's the spot where you want to land. That's where Marilyn Monroe was discovered and all that sort of stuff. It's the hip airport. So I worked there cleaning it up, and I met all of these fantastic people that were all big superstars, what I call in my book sort of American aristocracy, because that's what it felt like. They had their own planes, and this was the early era of the jet age. So some people had private jets. I worked for Frank Sinatra. He had a private jet. It was a little one, but it was still a jet. I mean, boy, it was really little. I was a kid, and it was like cramped. It was a Lear jet, and these guys were they were just amazing. They taught me so much about working, and they taught me so much about being altruistic and caring for others. I was amazed at how cool movie stars were. I always used to think that, well, are they really that nice, or are they just afraid that their plane is going to crash and they want to be cool with everybody when they're going down? Because I had a serious fear of heights. But I love flying in private planes. Like, I could go up in a private plane with these guys and feel like $1 million, but I'd fly commercially and was terrified. They'd have to isolate me on the plane because I'd scare the other passengers. But anyway, so the thing that was unique about this airport, that it would play a huge part in my future a few years later. So I finished up at the airport. I was probably around 15 years old. And then at that point, I had never touched a guitar. I was still only playing classical music. It's interesting, I just realized that I never really tried to play pop music on the classical instruments. Like, I would probably play pop music, like stuff from television or movies, like I'd play Rawhide, but I never tried to play what was on the radio. Wow, that's not in the book. That just hit me. That's weird. How could I not do that? I I never played Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini. Man, how did I get into pop music? But anyway, I never did that. I only did the classical stuff. When I was fooling around, I only played film music or whatever. But later on, I would move to New York. I moved back to New York because my grandmother died. So now I'm back in New York. I'm about 16 years old. I'm trying not to give you away the good bits because it's just too cool to read it. But anyway, so I get back to New York. I try and go to school, but basically, I've never really gone to school my whole life. I've always been registered, but I just wasn't a good student because, frankly, don't listen to this. It was boring. It was really, the classes never were where we were on a different level. I hung out at school. The lunchroom was amazing. I guess that's probably where we learned everything in lunchroom and detention. But it's funny. A friend of mine I saw not too long ago, who's known me since we were 16. He was 15 and I was 16, and he said to me, he said, "Man, you never went to school." He says, "You taught me how to get away with it." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And now he's a doctor, by the way. And he said, "Yeah, we never went to school. We just went to the building, but we didn't go to class. We didn't do anything." So, but I love to read. Reading, I always love to get tips and advice. As I said, I was just a sponge absorbing knowledge where I could get it. And in those days, I grew up as a hippie, and hippies were incredible. You'd sit down with somebody, and they loved it. Well, it's part of the vibe. They loved to philosophize, talk to you about the world, but they didn't mind giving you information. A lot of the stuff that I learned from my teacher was cool, but the stuff that I learned on the streets from musicians, just picking up a lesson, picking up a lick here and there, was just, all that stuff was invaluable because people who were doing it, they teach you little tricks, little clever bits to get along that somehow you don't learn in the formal settings. At least I didn't. And maybe there was something that was just in my DNA, the way I was wired, to just be weird, to not do things the way that it was supposed to do, that you were supposed to do, this built-in rebellious streak. But anyway, at some point I become a real musician, and I go from playing on the streets like a panhandling hippie to my first professional job, which was Sesame Street. I went, you guys said, "Wow, this guy went from like not going to school, blah, 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 and his first job is Sesame Street." Yeah, and the reason why is because I was a very good music reader. Because of my classical training that had preceded pop stuff, and guitar players are notoriously bad readers, like really bad. If in those days, if you could do sessions, it was all about the money and the skill and the execution and precision, I could do that. I was really good at that, and I made the conductors and the producers feel confident about hiring this new guy because I come in and read the music, and 15, 20 minutes later I was leaving and going to do another job. And I got a reputation of being quick and fast, and I went and auditioned for Sesame Street at Manhattan School of Music, and I got the job first day. And so I went from Sesame Street to Apollo Theater, blah, 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 blah. Fast forward. I won't talk about all that other stuff, which is pretty great. But at some point in time, I developed, no, it's too cool to read. So I get to a certain point, and I wind up being able to compose and do this for myself. And I make my first hit record, my very first hit record, in 1977. And I formed my band, Chic. And the thing that was interesting about my career and the way I developed and came up with this whole concept was, up until that point, I was never the front person. Like, I'm not a star. Like, I've worked for a lot of stars, and when a star walks in the room, you feel it's like, whoa. It's like you get caught in the slipstream of Madonna and all that. They walk in like they're important. But I never had that. I like just being part of the team. I like part of, just doing the thing. And so when we me and my partner, when we thought of the concept for our own band and how we would be, how we would approach pop music on our own, we actually hid in the background. So we created this entity that we could be a part of the team. At least that's what it looked like. Now, we were totally the bosses, and we ran it like, no. But we were in charge, but it didn't look like we were in charge. If you saw it, it just looked like, you know, we were just up there doing our thing. But we conceived this whole unit so that it would fit our personalities, which was basically to hide. So hide behind some pretty girls and let them sing the stuff that we composed. And just worked great. It was fantastic. We never had to carry the evening, so to speak. I didn't have to be, you know, Madonna or Prince or anything like that. But it really worked great. I could do what I'm best at, which is compose and live this sort of solitary life and fix it all and just do it and just say, here's how it goes. And it was fantastic. I mean, that gave us the skill set that I would need to become the producer that I've become. I learned how to do it for myself, and I learned how to do it for others. And I learned how to do it for others right away, because my second job after creating my own band was to create this thing called Sister Sledge. Now, Sister Sledge existed before we met them, but by the time we were assigned their record, they were not that successful. No one had really heard of Sister Sledge except a few really cool R&B people. It wasn't, they didn't have We Are Family. So we created this whole Sister Sledge concept by never talking to them on the phone, never met them, never had a conversation with them until they walked into the studio to sing the song We Are Family. We conceived the whole concept, just everything about it. They walked into the studio. We were actually still writing the lyrics to the song when they walked in. And anybody in show business knows that's not how it's done. You know, you do a lot of preparation and all that sort of stuff. And you send demos to the artist, and you may change the key and all that sort of stuff. But we didn't do it like that. We were creators. We just can conceive the thing right from the beginning, ground up, the way it's going to be, and that's how you had to do it. And there was no room for negotiation in that organization except for between me and my partner. And that's what I did. It's funny, to this very day, I didn't even realize this until about a week or two ago, actually about a month ago. I was doing a television show in England to promote the book, and the newscaster was saying to me, you know, blah, 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 you're such a great composer, how do you do this? And I went, oh my God, I'm not really a typical songwriter. Almost every song I've ever written in my life has been on, it's like an assignment. Most songwriters, you know, they write a bunch of songs and they give them out to people and they have people selling them, and you know, they create the songs by themselves, and then they just try and match it with whoever's out there. They're just writing songs and selling songs, writing songs and selling songs. But I realized that I get the job first, and then I start to compose. And it actually probably was the best thing for my personality, because I always looked at myself as a sort of problem solver. So whenever I compose for an artist, I figure out who they were and who I want them to be, or who I believe they're going to be in cooperation and collaboration with that person. So it's funny that, you know, when you read the book, you'll see how it all sort of ties together, but at the time that it was happening, I had no idea that it was arcing to this place that actually fit my chaotic roots, if you will. So from this totally chaotic existence in the beginning, it all started to come together in a very cohesive pattern to fit who I naturally was. And by the time I became 25, 26 years old, that scattered kid who was all over the map, like I am as an adult up here, does actually have a pattern to the way I do stuff. You know, I do think in terms of beginning, middle, and end and all that sort of thing, even though I do it in this very random, wacky way. And by the time, like I said, by the time I got to Sister Sledge, the next record was, I think, Diana Ross. You know, we did my own band, and they had this horrible event that they called Disco Sucks or Disco Demolition, which sort of made my group implode. But the thing is that the skill set that I had developed over that time, I still had. I was able to, you know, go on and do huge records with Diana Ross, and David Bowie, and all of those people that she mentioned at the beginning. And all of that stuff, all that work that I did with those people was some sort of variation of the stuff that I had learned when I put my own band together. It was always figure out the problem and write your way out of the problem. Should I have my book? No, anyway. As I said, I feel weird because I'm telling the story and I'm trying to keep people interested in reading the book, and like thinking like, I don't want you to go home and go, well, he already told me, oh, I read that already. No. So that's why I'm sort of skipping around here, because I do think it's a damn fine book. So, when I set out to do this thing, as I said, I was completely tricked into doing it before this person showed me that I actually had talent, that I could sit down and write something and it would be good. My editor and my publisher used to always talk to me about making sure that my words sang off the page. And when I finished this Herculean task, every time I would go over the pages and I'd read them aloud, because that was a really important part of doing it, boy, it sounded good to me. And the reviews have been amazing, and I'm actually just sort of blown away with this whole process. So, you know, as I said at the beginning, the interesting thing about this whole exercise was how close it brought me to my family. So, you know, all the success in the world, blah, 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 a lot of money, a lot of drugs, all that party and stuff. But the interesting thread through the book and through my life has been my relationship with my family. Mainly my mom, because of her peculiar existence, her being so young. Oh, also the thing I didn't mention is when I got my job with Sesame Street, at 19 years old, that's when my mom stopped working. So I have been supporting my mother ever since I was 19, and she has a really amazingly great life. And it's not as rosy as that. I mean, it's great from her point of view, but from my side, it's actually a little bit tangled. I remember once I was doing a record, and I had Herbie Hancock in the studio, and you know, it was Herbie Hancock. You know, how often you get a chance to have Herbie Hancock playing your record? And my mom called me up with some totally trivial bull that involved me paying thousands and thousands of dollars for something ridiculous. And Herbie Hancock said, "Oh, I see how this works." So Nile's mom calls and he gets on the phone. The session is over. Because basically that's so we've had this sort of tangled, crazy existence all of our lives. But doing the book was amazing to me, because when I interviewed my mom, she opened up in a way. She's always been cool and open, but she revealed stuff to me that's in this book, and I tell you that I had never heard it until she told me. And it was stuff that I was like, and everybody keeps asking me, how did your mom feel about you writing that? I said, what are you talking about? She told me. And I interviewed her and she told me that. So not like I knew it and held it inside and said, yeah, I'm going to tell the world. As a matter of fact, during my first book signing, true story, somebody in the audience asked me that question. And I says, what do you mean, how does my mother feel? They said, well, how does your mom feel? You know, you're putting all this stuff. I said, hold on, let's get her on the phone. So I said, hey, Mom, you know, I left some stuff out of the book, especially about the coat hanger abortions. Do you want to tell people about it? And she says, what part do you want to know, sweetheart? My mom's life was very, very difficult. And I understand now, after writing the book, that a lot of the stuff that I carried around my entire life was just based on a misunderstanding, which was very funny. Last year, well, I'm going to jump to our wacky ritual. So my family, I've been supporting my family for a gazillion years. And after September 11th happened, my mom decided that we needed to get together more because she just decided that. And so I did. And it started this annual ritual with my family where I go to Vegas, for my mom's 40th, 50th birthday. I'm not sure which one it was, but I bought her a house in Vegas that's really great and stuff. So they live there, pretty out of control, dysfunctional house, but it's beautiful and it's cool. And it's great to go to once a year. So that one time a year that I go there is Thanksgiving. And I've been doing this, ever since September 11th, and going out and having this wacky Thanksgiving with my family, but it's great. So after writing the book, I don't want to give it all away. It's just too good. It's too good. I can't. I'm not. You're right. I'm not going to go there. So anyway,
Maybe this is a good time to take questions.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. No, I just want to say though, I don't know. Are any people in the audience? Are you guys? Anybody writers here? Is anybody a writer? Sure. Okay. Oh. Okay. Cool. So you know the agony that I was going through for four years and change. But the whole experience of writing a book, having a beginning, a middle, and an end, especially something as personal as your autobiography or memoir, was amazing for me. It just completely changed the way that I look at everything, because for the first time I actually could look at a chronicle of, it's one thing to tell your story at a rock and roll party or something like this where you're just sort of telling funny little bits or just the sort of juicy parts. But it's another thing to just go through it page by page, day by day. I mean, some of this story, I can remember days in succession because of the trauma that was involved. So to put it down in a book and be able to just look at it all and see your life in front of you is a pretty amazing thing. I'd recommend the process to everyone. Because it's funny, I never kept, diaries or anything of the sort. So the fact that I have this thing in my hand is pretty amazing. So yes, now is a good time to take questions. And thank you, everybody, for listening to my scattered things. Maybe I could bring some clarity with questions. Yeah. Great. So she's got a mic. Let's see if you need it.
I feel very fortunate. Now was my upstairs on 71st Street. We shared a place together, and we worked at VH1 together. And I just need to know what's happened to the We Are Family Foundation and all the stuff that you've been doing about all that stuff, and whatever happened to the lawsuit from Reverend Falwell that you were multiculturalism and all that stuff.
I'm very happy to tell you that the We Are Family Foundation is doing amazing right now. We're doing really great. We've built, I don't even know, 27, 28 schools around the world. We have this fantastic new program called 3 Dash, where we bring in children, we bring in teens from all around the world every year. It's a year-long mentorship program. We give them money, computers, cameras, training, all sorts of stuff. And it's one of the most powerful things that I've ever done in my life. It's the thing that keeps me the most grounded. So we're doing fine. The lawsuits we won, all that thing was like it was so ridiculous. But everything is fine. Thank you. Give me some book stuff. Yeah. No, you don't have to. I'm just kidding.
First of all, thank you for doing this. It's a really fascinating story, and don't worry, I can't read this book. I actually have a question about your guitar playing.
Cool.
I've been a fan of yours since I was probably a teenager. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I hear you.
And you talk a lot about your composing, and I actually see some stuff on the internet where you talk about composing. And I happen to be just a huge fan of your guitar playing. I think you have a unique sound that I just always loved. I'm curious, when you hit your stride when you started playing guitar, I guess it sounds like that was maybe early 70s or so. Who were the guitarists who you were like digging at that time, who were helping you shape your sound?
Well, the thing is that I jumped over this. I didn't really mention my partner, Bernard Edwards, the guy who helped me compose all the Chic songs, and we were in the band together. He's the main person who taught me about that unique sort of thing that I do. Prior to that, I was mainly into jazz and classical. I loved Wes Montgomery like crazy. But from the early period when he was on Riverside. You know, I liked Django Reinhardt, I loved Hendrix, I loved rock and roll guitar players, I loved blues guitar players. But my style came from, it sort of developed because of my jazz training, but also because of the jobs that I were doing at the time. I was working at the Apollo Theater, and I joined this band that Bernard was the music director in, called New York City. And they had a hit record, and it was funky, and I had to learn how to play funky, and Bernard sort of showed me that style, and if you mix that with my jazz training, it comes up with the Nile Rodgers thing. Thank you.
Now, just really blown away by all the people that you've produced, and how would you handle like going from producing like Madonna, then like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimmy Vaughan would come in like and you would do their like record. What was your mindset? You know, how'd you approach all that stuff?
Let's go. I've never been intimidated on any project that we've ever done, ever. I feel so comfortable. The more talented, complicated, crazy the artist, probably the happier I am. I mean, the most complicated person I think I've ever worked with is David Bowie, and I love it. He speaks in the most, you think I'm weird, he speaks in the most abstract terms, and I get it. You know, it's like, he'll walk in and tell me things like, Nile, darling, I want the record to sound like this. And I go, I got it. Why does it sound like Acadia, natural spring water? Well, spring, natural, okay, understood. Hydrogen atoms, oxygen, but yeah, no.
Besides working with your own band, Chic, what would you say is like your favorite unfinished product with all the other bands that you produced?
It's really impossible. I mean, that's totally like, you know, your favorite child or something. Like if you have like, you know, a family, twins. No, I don't. I really don't. I always talk about my favorite experience, and it was doing the first David Bowie album that we did together, Let's Dance. And that's only because of the unique situation. One, because Bowie was Bowie, but two, because I had 6 failures in a row. And Bowie had been dropped from his record label. So it was like us against the world. And we had something to prove, and we pulled it off. And it was to have a person the stature of David Bowie just give me the reins and let me do what I do was an amazing feeling. That kind of trust, like I only had with my partner. Everybody else was always trying to second guess what we were doing, whereas David Bowie he had total trust and total faith in my ability to make that record, which for the most part he slept on the couch while I did. But it was cool though. No, it was actually the perfect partnership because he would walk into the studio with completely fresh ears, and it was an amazing thing because you know, I'd work with some, you know, I'm this taskmaster and I'm trying to get all the parts right and I'm always changing parts. But he would walk in and I'd say, David, what do you think? He'd walk in and go, wow. So you know, that's sort of my favorite, but only because of the uniqueness of the situation, not because I actually like it better than Diana Ross. I don't. But someone in the back. Oh, wherever. Oh, hey. Okay, good, I got it.
I don't know if I even really need this. You're my hero.
The people in the back may not hear you. Use it, it's cool. It's working.
You're a big, you're a hero for me. I really don't have any. I'm trying to think.
Oh, thank you.
Someone else I could put on my hero list, and I really didn't think of anyone. Your music was the soundtrack of my early adulthood. That was all there was. I was curious to know, when you started with Chic, the next thing that happened was the entire pop music industry started to sound like you.
Us.
Because either you wrote it or somebody was trying to sound like you.
Yeah.
So it all completely changed. And I was wondering, when that was happening, did you realize you were doing that? Was that something you turned around and looked back at and realized had happened?
You know, I've never talked about that until this time right now. It was a strange feeling. There was a part of me that was really flattered, but there was that one moment where I heard a record and I knew, oops, that's it for us, because at that point people sounded like us so much that we were trying to not repeat ourselves. We were always trying to do something new, but they'd always have a leg up on us because they were starting from where we had just finished. And I'll never forget when a person who didn't like me very much told me, "That's it for you now." You know, and I looked at him and I thought, wow, you know, you're right, because it was just one great record coming out after the next that had our little thing going. But we figured out something new, which was cool. We didn't know that we would, but so at the time we were just doing what we did. And you know, now when I go back and I listen to all that work, think about the fact that we had to do albums to get those singles. Right, so like a lot of my friends now, like I know a lot of hot producers and songwriters, and they could just do one song here and get it on this record and go, yeah, I got a song on Beyonce and I got a song on this and I got a song on that. But we had to do the whole album. So to have as many hit singles as we've had is pretty incredible. You know, the fact that, you know, like I said, I know a lot of modern people now who get to just put records everywhere. So at the time I didn't think about it in the same way that I see it now, because I was just like a sort of shark swimming forward. I just, you know, I didn't spend too much time worrying about the past. But now when I look at it, it was pretty great. It was tough. We were always trying to do something new. You know, I'm still, it's funny, someone said that, you know, whenever Nile talks about the disco sucks thing, he still feels scorched by it. Well, I am a little bit, because, you know, one day we were happening and the very next day people wouldn't answer our phone call. It was like, what did we do? Oh, somebody said you sucked. Oh, really? Okay, got it. You believe it? Okay, I guess it's right. You know, I guess the thing that's great for my career is that had to happen, and it was cool that people did copy us, and it was cool that, you know, people did hate us after a while, because it forced us to become innovative. It forced me to break up with my band. It would force me to do Bowie, Madonna, Duran Duran, all that stuff, you know, In Excess. I mean, a lot of people don't talk about In Excess, but that was the gateway drug. That exact record that he's got there. That was the gateway record to Duran Duran, and that just changed my life. So, yes.
Hi, my name is Nicolette, and I'm a senior at Staples High School.
Hey.
Hi. I was wondering, if you've obviously been through so much throughout your whole entire life, which event was it that shaped you the most as to who you are today, and that kind of like brought you to where you are now?
You mean like one single event?
If there was one, or a time period, or anything in specific that you could identify that kind of like laid a foundation as to who you became as a person and it helped you grow?
Well, I think that it was actually a series of events. It was, you know, getting a little bit here and there and then sort of putting a puzzle together, which is how I look at it. I remember the day that I sort of got focused and I knew that I was going to be a professional musician. It was at the airport in California, and yeah, I don't know if the story was true, but this is what I heard. This is the chatter that was going around the airport. Ray Charles used to own a private plane, and they had to do a gig, and they were in the plane, and it was foggy and blah, blah, blah. And somebody at the airport said that Ray Charles landed the plane because he couldn't see anyway. No, seriously. I'm telling you. So at this time I worked at the airport, so I knew about instrument landing and ILS and blah 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 and all that kind of stuff. And they were having a tough time, and the pilot was calling off the the positioning and stuff like that. Where's so-and-so, this heading, and the rumor around the airport was that Ray Charles landed the plane, saved everybody, and they went and did the gig. And I was like, wow. Are you kidding me? And for some reason, it sounded to me like musicians. Now, of course, I didn't think of myself like Ray Charles. I mean, who's spectacular, but I just thought that was the life for me, that musicians could do things that were special and that they cared for others. The altruistic part of my life was really important. I grew up, in the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts, and in the old days, like what happened to little old ladies? We used to, like elderly women would wait, and we would take them across the street, and we did that all the time. There was always somebody waiting there. Did they cure, old age and blind? But when I was a kid, we were always doing that. It's like they would wait for us. So I grew up caring about people, and I was socialized to care. So when I heard about the Ray Charles, it's just one thing on top of the other, and so music, Ray Charles, plane, fog, saved everybody. Hey kid, here's a tip. It's $50. All of that stuff made music very romantic to me. It was the thing I had to do because it fixed everything in my world. It would fix, me hating myself, me feeling ugly. It would also allow me to help other people. It was perfect. So that's the sort of event, if you will, that whole Ray Charles thing. But it was really something that was just happening. And one day you get to that point, you have a eureka moment and go, that's it, my life is about this, and I'm never going the other way. Thanks.
Thank you. Now that you've done this book, do you feel you want to do more?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Now, I never thought of myself as a writer, like that type of writer. I'm a songwriter. That's what I do. I'm a composer. But at the same time I was writing this book, I was composing a Broadway musical. And that's taken 4 or 5 years now, and we just got picked up by the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, which is a great regional theater in Alabama, and that's been going wonderful. And this book, by the way, started out as a Broadway musical idea. That's the truth. At the time, this predated Jersey Boys, by the way. So at the time, a good friend of mine was conducting for the musical Mamma Mia. And I went to see Mamma Mia, and I walked in and I said, wait, this is not an original story, because I had seen every movie in the world, and in 5 minutes I said, this is a Phil Silvers movie from way back when I was a kid called Buonasera, Mrs. Campbell. I remember seeing this movie when I was a kid, and everybody's looking at me going, and I'm like all pissed off, because it's like this huge show, and everybody's talking about how great it is. I'm going, this is a total ripoff. This is not, this is plagiarism. What are you? And then I realized that they never said it was an original story. They just said it was Mamma Mia. So anyway, all that's to say is that now that I've written my first musical, just the music and the lyrics, I went back to this original idea because I sat with a big producer about a week and a half ago. And it's so funny. After sitting with this guy for about 2 hours, and I just couldn't stop talking, he just set the Broadway record for, I don't know, some crazy thing, $1 million an hour or something with Hugh Jackman. And anyway, after sitting with this guy, he said to me, he says, Nile, why don't you write that musical that you were writing originally, talking about this thing? And I said, okay, and I started 2 nights ago. I sent it to him last night, just the first bit, the opening bit, and the same thing happened with him that happened when I sent this book to Random House. One draft, the very first draft, he went, wow, this is brilliant, let's go. He's flying over next week. So,
No, your book was a great read, a good memoir. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it.
Thank you.
the whole disco sucks thing, it seems like when you kind of look back on it in retrospect, Dance, 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 you kind of probably could have said, you know, it was more disco, but as it got to the Freak, and then Good Times, and especially Rebels Are We, was that the list?
Yeah.
That was really very sophisticated. So I'm curious, did you think you were kind of being tarred with the disco sucks, you know, label when you weren't disco, or you understand what I'm saying? You know, were you kind of like, well, we're not really disco, or we're disco, you should just kind of deal with it, you know, because you kept evolving, she kept evolving.
We never thought of ourselves as disco. We were an R&B band that did a couple of fast songs on our records. You know, we grew up with the concept of albums. We were album artists. We got a singles deal, but that singles deal led to us getting an album deal. And we conceived albums as projects. It's like a film to me. I don't, you know, but that's the era that we came from. Albums were concepts. So we never thought that it applied to us until after people said it applied to us. Actually, when they even had that Disco Sucks thing, we were gigging that summer. Matter of fact, that was the summer that the Pittsburgh Pirates won the World Series. And how about that? Talk about, like, so that whole event, the disco demolition thing, happened at Comiskey Park. Where did the White Sox finish that year? The Pittsburgh Pirates, who were using We Are Family as their theme song, won the World Series. I want to say, well, that shows you about your Disco Sucks, pal. But no, I mean, it only bothered us once we saw that we were labeled that way. We didn't think of it prior to that happening. It was in late 1979 and 1980 when we did the Diana Ross record, and they completely hated the Diana Ross record, but anybody who's heard that record knows it's certainly not a disco record. It doesn't sound like any other Chic record that existed before or after. It's a unique product that was only for Diana Ross, and that's what we do. That's what we've always done, so.
We'll go here and then.
Yeah.
Hi, Nile. How are you?
Hey, I'm fine, Dorothy.
I was just, I just wanted to touch that Diana Ross part of your book, and I just thought that was a great story that you told in New York, how you brought her back out. And I just, in Coming Out.
Yeah.
That's a great story. You can tell that it's not telling too much of the book, but, like your Good Times and, a lot of your songs, how they evolved, are in the book, which is terrific.
And actually the origin of the songs. That's what I was trying to explain to you in my wacky way at the beginning, that when I was a kid walking around the neighborhood, I was composing and thinking of songs and motifs and blah, blah, blah. It's something that I've always had. And now I'm writing a musical with it. No.
Hello, Nas. I'm from England, and we just love your music. Oh, that you know, but
I do know that.
Yeah.
And you love my book too. It's actually doing really great over there.
What I really wanted to ask you is that, like, when the Sugar Hill Gang and it's that early rap coming out of Bronx, African Bambaataa and all these kind of people. They were playing your music in their samples, and then they were rapping. So I mean, really, you were there at the start of the new style, that was coming out of the city, out of the streets, So it wasn't all disco, was it?
Well, no. The early hip hop movement, Good Times. Matter of fact, I was on a television show. Actually, I wasn't on it. Somehow I screwed up. I was watching a television show, and they were interviewing LL Cool J, and they asked him what was the single most important event in the history of hip hop, and he said without wasting a beat, he said, "Oh, the release of Good Times." He said because without Good Times, that was the song that every MC had a rhyme to. Every single MC, if you play Good Times, and even to this day, right, Rich, we play Good Times. If there's any MC in the house, like they're up on stage and like you can't keep them off the stage. We did we played the VH1 first hip hop honors or hip hop awards or whatever, and it was supposed to be us, and then we bring out the Sugar Hill Gang, which is what we did. Right. The television show actually wound up having to go off the air because there was no MC in that audience that could stay in their seat. And the next thing you know, you watch it, it's probably on YouTube. If you watch it, the entire audience is up on that stage with us, waiting to get up there and do their rhyme on Good Time. It was hysterical. And they basically had to cut away from us and they go to MC like, okay, and that concludes the, you know, they had to stop the award show because no one was going to leave the stage. So it's a great feeling to have composed that song. And, you know, we didn't know that we were doing that. We were only writing Good Times. The first time I heard Rapper's Delight, I actually thought that the DJ at that club had just recorded his own version of Good Times, and he and a couple of his friends rapped over it, or were in the DJ booth rapping live. I had no idea that it was a record that you could buy, and a record that was destined to be bigger than Good Times, which was pretty... Oh God, yes. That's one of the really funny stories in the book. Where the mob guys come, you know, and they threaten us, and they tell us that even if, you know, we sue the people who the copyright infringement, because it was, like you said, they sampled our record and our strings, our great string sound from Good Times, and the guys come into the studio with guns and the whole bit. And it was unbelievable. And we had heard this stuff. We never thought it was real. And they come in and they threaten us, and we didn't know anything to do except continue with the lawsuit, because even though they told us if we win, we'll lose, all we thought about was if we let them take Good Times, then they're just going to go back and take Le Freak and take everything we did. So we figured, well, if they're going to kill us, we might as well get it over with. I mean, that's how we looked at it. We weren't like these bad dudes, but it was the only logical thing to do, so we had to take them on. And we wound up winning, and I think at the end of the day, you know, cooler heads prevailed, and it was more than enough money to go around, because Rapper's Delight was, I don't even know how big it was. I mean, I still get a ton of money every year from that copyright. And, you know, the original version was only for sale as a 12-inch. So we were getting paid 3 times the royalty that you would get for a regular single. It was unbelievable. It was like, wow. Sell your record. It was amazing. We had never seen anything like, you know, the great thing about my career is that I have a lot of high points that were the first, and that was the first. I mean, it was, I'm pretty sure that Rapper's Delight is probably still the biggest single in hip-hop history. If not, it's still 1, 2, or 3. Maybe it's only been eclipsed by maybe something like Eminem or somebody, but you know, it's huge. Changed my life.
Yeah, hi now. I read the book. Everybody needs to buy it. It's great. It's unbelievable.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if you could just hit on I was listening to one of your albums the other day, the Vaughn Brothers, Family Style,
Yeah.
and to me that was like a big departure for what you were doing. You know, you're now doing Texas R&B rock stuff, and it was just obviously the timing was just crazy. Obviously, Stevie Ray passed right after that album came out. But I'm wondering if you could talk about that album and what it was like to work with those two.
Well, Stevie and Jimmy were just fantastic. I mean, you know, Stevie Ray was probably one of the greatest people I've ever met. I mean, not only was he an amazing musician, I mean, stunning the way he played guitar, but he was like a great guy. You just loved him. He was generous, kind, newly sober. He had totally, when I first met Stevie, it was on the David Bowie record, we were doing Let's Dance. And he was that same guy, just high and out of control, but still an amazing musician, kind and generous and just incredible. And one of the saddest things about that project, you know, obviously his death, but just artistically, we had just scratched the surface when we did that record, because my plan, because I'm a planner, you know, my plan was, I had always wondered why the two brothers hadn't made a record together. So I knew that there was a big hurdle for us to get over spiritually and artistically before we got down to the real meat and potatoes of making that record. And at that point, all of our careers had reached such a plateau that we actually could do whatever we wanted to do. And I have a daily blog that I run, and a couple of days ago, I ran the interview, and it was so sad for me to hear Stevie's words when he was talking about how much he needed that record. He needed that record the same way I needed this book. It helped heal, even though he and Jimmy never had any problems. There was never any fighting. They loved each other. I mean, Stevie idolized Jimmy. But there was something that had kept them apart as far as making a record is concerned. And it seemed obvious to everyone in the business, like, why aren't you guys doing it? So this was the opportunity to do it. And for it to end so tragically was something that took a long time for me to get over. It was hard for me to be a professional and even finish that record because Stevie actually died before the record was done. We had to finish it without him. And so to me, it was something that was an unfinished project. Like, I don't know where it really would have ended up had he been alive. That is correct, right, Rich? Are you there? He's grabbing 40 winks, right?
No,
I was just.
I'm listening.
No, it's cool.
Whenever we talk about Stevie, I guess.
I know, it's a tough one for us.
I think that we were done, but it hadn't been released yet.
We were completely done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. We had the release party. We even had a party to celebrate its ending in the summertime, at which we all talked about we're going to get together in September.
Wow.
August 28th, and he played at Valley.
Yeah, see, that was such a traumatic experience for me. I remember when I heard the test pressing, we were in Los Angeles at the time. I don't know why we were out there, but I couldn't even listen. I pulled over to the side of the road. I was driving on Sunset, and I got it, and I was going to listen to I guess it was a cassette or something, because I was in a car, and I just was weeping. I couldn't even get through it. So it's my memory with that record. That was really, really traumatic. But the musical part, thank you. The musical part of it was great, and I knew that we were going to have. See, it's funny that I knew that we were going to have a long career and a long relationship together. Because if you ever saw us in the studio working together, it was magic. I mean, we loved each other, and we knew that we were just scratching the surface.
How about one last question right here in the front?
Yeah, my man.
So I know you have lots of amazing songs that you wrote for other people, and like you said before, you get the project before you start writing it, or start thinking about it. Yeah. I was just wondering, when people come up to you with assignments, and do you just write them out of the blue, or do they give you things to write about, or just?
It's different every time. If it's a developed artist, usually I help them figure out where we're going to go, like what's the record going to be about. If it's a new artist, which I haven't done too many of them, I try and have them figure out how do they see themselves, what do they see themselves as in the marketplace. If they could think of somebody else that they could open for, as if they were doing a tour, who would that person be? Who do you feel like you have the greatest affinity with? So I can do it in any one of a number of ways. Like, I'm not restricted to only working a certain way. But if I had my preference, I always like to have as much information as possible. Because I think that the more I know, the more I can help the listener know. Hope that makes sense. Thank you.